lot happened. He's been buried. Sorry about that mix-up on that particular there. He's been buried, and a school in his hometown named after him by the government of Edo State. Well, joining us to look at that great Nigerian as well as Madiba this morning is GT Ogunye. He's a legal practitioner, and thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Yes,
you once worked with Professor Iyayi, I guess, or served on the same committee. Tell us.
Yes, specifically between 1995 and 1997, whilst he was the president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. I also served as the Secretary General of the organization. Mr. Fenfana was the Vice President of the organization then, and then you have others on the ESCO. But our relationship predated that era and continued even after that era. Remembering or recalling that occasion now, he was begged practically to be the president of the organization. So here was a man who was working in an organization and who wielded enormous authority without claiming power. He had a huge moral force behind him because of his commitment, because of his patriotism, because of his sacrifice and selflessness. And so he was a darling of all, in a manner of speaking. And so after serving 2 years, he also said he wanted to move on. And that was very humbling for me and striking. He never sought that office. And right from the outset, he said, I will do 2 years, and then I will step down.
You know, talking about, well, his personality and now bringing the issue of his influence, well, the case in point, you remember how he was dismissed then at the University of Benin because he was accused. It was on television then. They announced that, well, they had other businesses, and when they were dismissed, himself and one other lecturer, they took that matter to court, and he saw that all through until he won that particular case, and he came back. And even at that, he never for once mobilized people against the decision of the government at that time, but we saw the huge protest that came with that particular decision of government, even though everything was sorted out in the law court. How influential was he in the CDHR when he was with you?
His involvement with CDHR was just one tiny facet of his total commitment. It's just one theater. You know, you recall that before that time, he had been the chairman of ASUU, University of Benin branch, so that by 1984 he was already the chairman of a local union in University of Benin, and between 1986 and 1988, he was president of the Academic Staff Union of University. So that when he died, the immediate reaction from some quarters was, he was president several years back, while he's still on the negotiating team. I think that spoke to his relevance, that spoke to his commitment, because you recall that between that time and now, we've had several ASUU presidents, including Professor Ataheru Jega, you know, who later went on to become a vice chancellor of his university before he is now in INEC. I reference that to just say that we can choose our path. We can decide, after occupying certain critical positions in civil society organization, to then work with government, with the establishment. I'm not condemning it. But we can also remain true to our inner convictions, more so when we see in the establishment the very, you know, attributes, characteristics of those things we fought for over the years. And so we say, okay, I'll give these people a wide bath, because we are not having the kind of people that I have espoused over time that we should have in government. And so more and more people like that will still relied on, you know, in negotiation with government. But overall, let me just tell you that Professor Festus Iyayi was a first-class brain. And it is important that we stress this, because during the military era, particularly during the Babangida regime, when it was booted out of the system with Dr. Babs Agbonifo and Professor Ishesage, who was then the Dean of the Faculty of Law, University of Benin, by the Grace Aile Williams administration. The accusation then was that these people were teaching what they were not supposed to teach. And indeed, the state made that wild allegation that they didn't know what they were doing. They, rather than teach in classes, they were just rabble-rousing and all that. And the Mustafa Committee panel was in this setup following the May 23rd massacre of ABU students in 1986 to then go around all over the country, to find out whether these lecturers are really doing their work. And at the tail end of the exercise, Mustafa Committee panel found that these were the real people working on the campuses. They have no heirs. I'm not a teacher, but I know that in pedagogy, the more you friendly with the thought, the more you are able to impart ideas into them. And so they did this successfully. There was no wall between them and the students. They were at home with their students, and they were good teachers. So he wasn't just a good activist. He was also one of the best brains that the Nigerian system had produced. And his degree, speak eloquently to this, schooled in 3 countries: United States, the whole Soviet Union, England, and before coming to Nigeria to be a lecturer. And even whilst he was humiliated out of the system and was fighting for vindication, judicial vindication, legal vindication, he kept working, so that by 1988 he had won the Commonwealth Prize for Literature with his novel, The Heroes. So that you wouldn't even know whether he was a literary giant or a business administration scholar or a labor leader. He struggled all these spheres with ease and with competence and with passion. And so he was like a father to many of us. I attended the University of Benin, and I know that he was a role model. He was an inspiration to many. You alluded to what happened immediately his sack was announced on the NTA. It was a spontaneous reaction by students on campus and said, you can't sack this person.
Because that's how influential he's always been. Because I also recall then, even though he taught business administration, there was no one who never got to know about the name and the man Festus Iyayi, whether you're in medicine, whether you're in law, irrespective. And he also had some other fantastic people who were also with him, Agbonifo, Dimo, and the others. And these people, they were so influential. And now we've seen so many other stories about this particular man. In celebrating the life and times of Professor Iyayi, what can we draw from what he stood for?
I think that celebration of the dead and paying tributes to the departed, particularly when they're good people, only has meaning when we do this for the purpose of inspiring the living and for making the living to do what is right. Manila is dead now, and we'll get to that. And all sorts of people are jumping over themselves and, sharing encomiums, paying tribute to him. And then you wonder, if these people were to emulate Mandela, the world would be, whether the world wouldn't be a better place. And so, for Iyayi, I think that we do what we do, not just to eulogize him, not just to show how good he was a good person, but to tell the living, younger ones, that in the face of entrapping challenges, I'm using my words carefully, entrapping challenges, you challenge and you think that what you need to do, even as a writer who has written so much about how bad the system is to use the pedestal of what you've written to then find yourself in the bosom of power. Those are entrapping challenges. In the face of all that, you build your inner resilience. It's not about being dogmatic. It's not about fixation. It's not about not knowing how to be pragmatic. It's about looking at power and seeing that power is not being used for the common people and choosing not to side with that kind of power. Rather, choosing to then work with the people, to empower the people so that they can take care of themselves. And I think that that's the lesson we, people of my generation, younger people, should learn from the Iyayi example. He could have chosen another path. He could have done something else. When he was ASUU president, the vice president, military vice president of Nigeria then, Ahomu, was just his neighbor next door from Ura to Ugbebu. They're so close. So he could have worked to him, and who told you that he never had invitations to work with the government to abandon principles?